See it. There we go.
Oh, it's live. Ooh.
Hello, I am Alexandria Williams.
Oh, Tony Talby. I'm Paula Sanchez.
Hannah Del Rosario.
And then Nicole McEwen.
All
right. Let's get it in. So maybe we can each talk a little bit about like the case studies that we read about. Just like something interesting you learned from the people we read about.
Like one thing we just put down answering.
Like a main takeaway. Something that surprised me about mine. So I read about Osman. So he's like a Muslim refugee, and I really didn't ever think about like the older students coming from different countries who don't know how to speak English and how they have to like catch up with content in English, like in the higher grades. And I don't know, it's just really surprising, and I was wondering like how they're supposed to be able to do that when they're so far behind, like in general. Like, do they get held back a grade? Like, how do they do that? Because I remember someone else talking about something like that too in their case.
I have a few questions about that too. Yeah, I don't know.
But something that concerns me a lot, I guess, is if you're having older students come in that haven't had education at all, that are coming in as like an 8th grader, then like not only are they learning that language, but they're then behind on all that content. Like, how are you supposed to be learning things like pre-algebra at that age when you haven't even had basic like computational? And it happens a lot where they get held back. They're just stuck going back.
Well, I think it's also interesting because like math is universal. However, like I can't say for other countries, but there are points about it that are universal to the point where it could transfer over. Everything that he has learned could transfer over.
But what about the students who haven't had like formal like schooling?
Right. That's kind of what I'm saying, is that like, so it only works in certain cases, and also at the same time, if they do come over, like the grade levels could mismatch too. So like he might be learning 6th grade math when he was in 8th grade over in, I'm sorry, where'd you?
He's from Somalia.
Because you broke up for a second. You broke up for a second.
Oh, okay.
I just want to make sure that that's it too. Because it'll break up on the recording. If I'm seeing you break up, then it will break up on the recording too.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Like she couldn't hear us.
Oh, should we scoot her in?
I was just trying to make sure.
There we go. There we go. Lean with it, rock with it. There we go. We're good.
And so, like, the grade levels, he might be the age of 7th grade and learning 7th grade math, but he comes into the United States and is the age of 8th grade in the United States. So I think that also is like a lot of problems as well.
Yeah, the cultural mismatch. Like, how are you supposed to like make up for that? Do you bring in specialists? Do you have to teach them separate content than the rest of your class?
Right.
Yeah.
There's no specialists.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's like comparing that to like what we were talking about in our multicultural ed class, how they were saying all the different methods of working with dual languages, how like that pulling out method, like the effects of that, but it's also at the same time like getting a specialist. Sometimes it seems like there's an option, because one thing that I wonder is like, how am I supposed to teach students who have a completely different language? And it's like, make sure that they don't have that gap because they're trying to learn English at the same time. It's also like, yeah, it's interesting because one of the case studies that I read about Sarah, she was in ELL, and it was helpful, but she almost felt like she learned more Spanish than she did English, because the program was geared more towards Spanish as opposed to Arabic.
Yeah. So how do you cater to that too? Like when it's like when they're catering to like dominant minority languages, if that makes sense, instead of like on the side, like subgroups, Yeah, I feel like that really puts kids at a disadvantage, and how are we supposed to deal with that?
Right. Yeah. And I think that's also where, you know, like knowing the resources of the community is really important as well. And we're like going to be doing our community maps and everything, and just making sure that you can help in the most ways possible is really important. Yeah. Something that I found really interesting about my person, I don't know how to say her name. Sharma. Is that she was born in California, but English still wasn't her first language. But when she would go to school, the teacher with the case study was mentioning that she wouldn't want to interact with any other Punjabi students. Yeah. And it didn't really explain why, because I remember I was like, I read that, I was like, that's really weird.
Yeah, like when you want to communicate with people who are like human.
Or like, or at least like help because you know what it's like, or something like that. Because they said that she was very socially, what's the word am I looking for? Very socially, just like okay. Like she had the same idioms as her friends. Like she was able to speak the language really well with her friends. I mean, she did have some accents and some vocab. Yeah, but thank you. So it really surprised me that she wouldn't want to befriend the other Punjabi students or like new incoming Punjabi students.
I think it makes sense at the same time, like if you're just hanging out with the other Punjabi students and you're not really, you know, I guess it wouldn't be like really immersing yourself in like that dominant culture that I'm sure she was trying to be a part of, especially at that age, and it's so important to like fit in with everyone. You know, it might make sense that she was trying not to, you know, pull attention to the fact that you know she wasn't born here. Hanging out with other people.
That's very true.
Yeah, that kind of connects to the other case study that I looked at, because the parents were actually very much against this kindergarten girl doing bilingual Spanish education. They were like, if she holds on to her Spanish too much, she won't be successful in America because her English won't be as good. And her teacher was a Puerto Rican woman from the South Bronx. And so she actually convinced the family to like holding onto the culture and using Spanish language would actually be really helpful. So I wonder if that girl had that idea that to be successful she had to abandon like her culture.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just like that idea of, oh, if like I become like all my dominant like classmates, then I'll fit in, I'll be successful too. And it's kind of sad because then you just lose your culture at that point. Yeah,
I can relate to that. I went to a really small school, like really small to where the point where I just grew up with the same 25 people, like from kindergarten to 6th grade until I changed schools. And I was like only one out of, it was just me and my cousin who were like Hispanic. And then I went to a school where there was a large Native American population. So while there weren't only colored people there, but we were still like just Hispanic. It was just us two. And it was like, there was nothing wrong with it, but I always felt like nobody was there to like reinforce my culture or my language. Is that when I was younger? So I always felt like, not that I was ashamed, but that was like I was different and I wasn't like accepted in a way.
Like a little disconnected. Yeah.
And I feel like for so long, different has been looked upon as bad. Exactly. I think that's where like these articles and all these classes are really helping us change the fact that different is good.
Yeah, and I didn't know the reason behind it until like now. Much later in my life, until I'm in college, like there's a reason why I felt like that. And it's because of this.
Yeah. And it that sort of ties into that article from Dean Rios, where he was saying that multicultural education is a human right. And it's not just so that the minoritized groups can hold on to their identities. It's also so that the majority groups can learn to be more accepting and learn more like tolerance and ability to adapt.
It's definitely important.
In my case studies, one thing I thought was, I really liked my case study because it was like that American dream where they immigrated from my teens with their Jose Luis, Guillermo, and Patricia from El Salvador. I don't know if you guys read it, but they came and they worked hard and they became successful. The American dream, and it turned out really well for them. And one thing, like, wonders because they're from El Salvador, they went to Tucson. In Arizona is a big Hispanic population, even though it's different than Mexico. They were still. I wonder if they were like accepted in a way.
I actually didn't realize Arizona being such a big population. Any
like border state, I guess, is pretty. Pretty. Yeah. That's why it's because of the border states. And so I didn't say, but I imagined that there was a lot of like support at their schools.
Oh, absolutely.
Spanish-speaking students,
especially
border states.
Did you hear about like how they're trying to teach like Mexican culture classes in like Arizona schools? And there's like big backlash about it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you didn't? Oh yeah, there was like a whole documentary about it. How they're like protesting because it's about their culture, but they wouldn't let them. Oh. Yeah, it's how big the population is down there. Yeah,
it's huge.
And it's
Arizona has English only laws. Sure.
Yeah, that's why there's so much pushback.
Oh, does it?
Which makes no sense when it's like a border
state. That's why, though, is since it's a border state and they have such a huge Hispanic population, like
they're like,
the dominant culture's pushing back.
It's so sad. It's so sad.
This was also during time, it was like early mid-'80s too.
Oh, really?
So they were different.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's also interesting because like America is supposed to be like the immigrant country. Like everyone comes
where it was
to
founded from.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's how it became a country. Kind of. But
yeah, it was a country before that, but
with some problematic borderlines. I mean, but that's okay. It's just, it's really interesting that all these people have such strong opinions about what it should be like when it's actually like the roots of the exact opposite.
Yeah, you can't claim this country as your own when it wasn't yours in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah, and the way we like came about getting this country, it's like
nobody thinks about it.
I know. It's it's like I don't know. I'm not proud of that.
Right. So, but some people are.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
That's what's scary. It's becoming more prevalent. People are like more vocal about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of people who still actually celebrate Columbus Day and don't recognize and like all the Thanksgiving backlash when people like try to actually touch on what really happened, and they're like, no, we want to keep this holiday like it was like cool.
Turkeys and pumpkin pie. Yeah, no, it's lamb taken days. Yeah, exactly. Pilgrim hats.
I watched this one like small documentary to where like a lot of Americans on Thanksgiving actually go out and like pray and kind of mourn.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
I don't remember which tribe it was. I think it was somewhere in the Midwest, but they actually go to a certain part. I don't remember what it was, but they go and mourn and pray, and it was really sad.
I mean,
that's kind of reality of things. Like,
I mean, of course, they don't celebrate it, or Columbus Day, same thing. It was like the fact that they got like, that day, everybody's happy and celebrating. They're like mourning.
Yeah, but that's besides the point, guys.
Yeah.
So I was at recently.
But sorry to interrupt. Do you mind speaking up just a little bit?
Yeah, sorry. At Wade King, because not this quarter, but last quarter, I was doing like a literacy thing there, and in the hallway they had all these essays like posted on the wall of different, just like historical figures and people who made big discoveries in the world. And half of the essays was written for Columbus that were posted on the wall, which really surprised me. That was, last quarter. And I really thought that was something that was talked about in schools anymore.
Yeah.
It is really interesting.
I thought they stopped talking about that a while ago because it's whole history. That's wow.
That's when we had the day off from school for Columbus Day.
Yeah.
And it's like thinking about like, because we were talking about how like the school culture helps the students succeed who are like coming in from different countries. And it's like, what sort of culture does that set up? Like, when we do things like take an entire day off for Christopher Columbus, or spend a lot of time what sort of culture does that set, or like press
Hey, Nicole.
student?
Cool.
You say that one more time
You're-
because you cut out.
Yeah.
Okay. It's mostly just like when you focus on the sort of like, for lack of a better word, like fluffed up, or like the like cleaner versions of like history, culture, or precedent does that set for your students?
I mean, that's what's encouraged to be taught in schools. Like, that's how history books are written, to frame like the white man as like the conqueror and like the powerful, you know, when in reality it was like the oppressor. And they don't really like mention that. Even throughout high school, I feel like we didn't really touch on that as much. Like, they'd mention it, but it wasn't really like a fact that we were like, oh man, that was messed up, you know? Yeah. I don't know.
Well, and the thing that like I've kind of recently come into light of, like a shock of my education, is that I don't know if you guys ever heard about the Brown versus Board of Education and how it went.
We're in your
You too. But just the fact that it's like not happy-go-lucky, and you're like, wait a minute, that's what they taught us growing up through school.
Entirely a white savior complex of just like, oh, we're going to save these black children from the black schools, and it's like, no, the parents just wanted the choice of where to send their kids to school.
Yeah, instead of it being like a segregation issue, it was just like lack of choice. And you're like, well, that is not what I was taught at all.
So what did you guys think of the different like English learner categories? Like the newly arrived, like long-term English learner, those sort of things.
Well, I did long-term English. I went on my own little rant on the whole long-term English learner. I was like, so actually, we're all long-term English learners. Yeah, because I read that, I was like, well, wait a minute, like you're not even considering the people that are like still learning vocab words in 7th grade as well. I mean, we're still doing spelling words in freshman year of high school. So I just thought that it was really interesting that they didn't take into consideration that. And I know that we're talking about like ELL. And that's what ELL. But
there's still language to be learned.
Yeah, I'm also just, you know, like surprised that no one ever really focuses on the fact that everyone's learning English still at that point. But I think different levels. Anyways, that was my rant for the moment of it.
Everyone is still learning. I thought that was so cute.
Like, I'm gonna fight for everybody on this one.
I was a little conflicted on, I think it's the might be the recently arrived. It's one of the long-term English learner categories, but it was the one that I think the way that you pronounce his name is Tu fit into. So it's mostly just like it's very unlikely that they will be successful in school, just because they're like, I'm pretty sure it's one of the categories where like they're coming in late and there's a high risk of dropout. And like, I understand it, but I also feel like it has a negative attitude because it categorizes these people as basically people who will not be able to succeed.
Is that what it said? Did it like say that it's really
they
likely?
have like a high rate and like really, like not likely to perform well on standardized tests and things like that. It's the same thing we were talking about earlier, that you know about like people or kids coming in late in the system and not knowing English and maybe not having formal education or having skipped grades or whatever, have interruptions in their education. I think that maybe we should take a pause and note for a muddy question. That is one that we've been discussing.
Sorry, can you speak up just a little bit?
Muddy question.
Muddy question.
Alert!
On the video.
Oh, she's writing it down.
We need
I thought you were writing it.
Yes, I'm writing
Oh,
down.
okay. I learned my question.
On the video.
Writing.
Say the time on the video, or do it
No,
like
It doesn't say the time.
the time. No, it doesn't do the video.
Wait, what was the question? Ben, you want to just start it?
It's probably like half an hour in.
Oh my gosh,
Oh,
this
really?
sounds off. I hate that. It's like,
I know.
Sync up with my mouth.
The
Yeah.
movie.
It's like,
Yeah, it's a voiceover.
I was.
Yeah, it's probably like half an hour in, or so. I'll look through the video before I post it.
Okay.
how do I write it?
I would just say, you know, how do older students coming to the U.S.
Yeah, become successful.
academically,
Yeah.
become successful
Mhm.
when they're really behind academically or just learning English.
Yeah, but I feel like at this point in our resources and like how aware we are of like this population, it's kind of likely that they're gonna drop out or they're gonna like not do well because of the circumstances that they're given. You know,
Yeah.
like people don't know how to accommodate to it, so they're facing all these like social problems and they're dealing with having a hard time in school. So I think it's a fair assumption to say, but I don't know.
It is a fair assumption. The thing that I guess I was just thinking of is where is, for lack of a better word, blame? Like, where is the blame being placed? Like, is it on them coming in late, or is it on like the institution that we've created?
I feel like it's the institution.
Oh, it's definitely
Yeah,
curriculum and all that.
Yeah, you
because-
can't blame the student. They're just they're
Yeah.
trying to
Well, I think that also, I mean, not that it's blaming the student because it's not like their fault that
Yeah.
another country, but it is harder to learn languages older in life. You know, like that's
Mhm.
something that you're born to do early on.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's something if they're moving here like later on in their, you know, education, that's going to be more difficult for them if they moved in like kindergarten or first grade.
Mhm.
Well, I also don't see a lot of them out seeking help to learn the language or out seeking ways to learn the language as well.
That's true.
I don't see somebody going like, "Oh, what's this word? Teach me about it." I see people going, "I don't know that word." It's like,
But
well,
how many instances have you dealt with dealing with immigrant populations? Like, when have you had the chance to do that? Because what if they just don't know how to? Like, they don't know how to communicate that need to people.
well, yeah, that's true. But at the same time, I also like, I don't know how to say this. It's also the student's responsibility as well to take on that learning role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the
Right.
learning role is such a big concept and a big idea that, like you said, like most of them don't know how to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, it seems like maybe they're not trying the hardest that they could because they don't know how to go about it.
But it's also really
Does that
hard
make
for them when they're in a room full of people who are different color skin,
Mm-hmm.
who sound
Oh,
different.
they're
yeah,
doing
I
it all
totally
this-
get that. Yeah.
Like that social pressure not
Yeah.
to like, let
Yeah.
everyone know that
Exactly.
you don't
Yeah,
understand
or like
too, 'cause
embarrassing.
that's
accent. It's
Yeah.
embarrassing, exactly, because it's and they're
Oh yeah.
around it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
I feel like it's the school's job to know like how to help these students.
right, I feel like it's more of like there need to be resources, like
Yeah.
teachers or specialists to go out and help them,
Yeah, of course.
instead of just depending on their role as like the learners.
Mm-hmm. Because
I
they're
guess-
still figuring out how to deal with
Yeah,
school. How are they
exactly.
supposed to reach out? And,
Exactly.
Well, I guess what I'm kind of saying is that, like, in order to learn, you need to have an open mind type of thing. I guess that's
Yeah.
towards that.
Well,
I'm not saying that it's like completely
No,
their own fault to be like, I
Yeah.
need to learn this, but you know, just like the fact of an open mind, the fact of like, and like you said, it's really hard to do that when everyone's like, you speak a different language. What's wrong with you?
Well, I think even that though is part like that's the teacher's responsibility to create that kind of classroom environment where
yeah,
they can
community.
and to just you know to teach ELL students just the you know practice of like if you don't understand then ask, don't just you know accept that you don't understand. I want you to
Yeah,
you know if you're not understanding what I'm telling you, make me say it 6 different ways until
yeah.
you know.
One thing I read in a book was the teacher was saying, if you need help, we are all here, instead of like, oh, come ask me, or ask 3 before me. I've heard that one before a lot. Like, ask 3 before me. It's like, no, like, we are all here for you. Like, you have 28 resources here. like including me. So I thought that language was pretty cool to
Yeah, I like that. But I do also get what you were saying, where like they need to have an open mindset, because the book was saying that 2 was fitting into that one category, and like he ended up dropping out and joining a gang, but he also would only attend school for about like 2 to 3 days a week, and when he was there, he was just completely checked out. And so it's like it is definitely a mix of both, but I feel like setting up the effective classroom culture.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Wow.
Okay.
One little note that I had.
Oh.
Nicole, I think it was in your post, and you asked the question, what can I do while having the positionality that I have?
Oh, that was a good one.
Yeah. So I was thinking about that a lot, and I have an uncle that's an elementary school teacher, and I was talking to him recently about this when I was talking about how I was doing the LLC program, and
You broke up.
sorry, I was talking to my uncle who's a 5th grade teacher, and he has a lot of language learners in his classroom. And he was saying that he spends all of his summers when he's not working, like learning languages, and that he'll like take Spanish classes and like,
awesome.
like Mandarin and like all these other languages. He's like devotes his summers to like learning how to speak other languages so that he can help them better.
So cool.
Just like one, yeah, just like one more thing.
It's our uncle. Okay. Unless you want to be related, I don't know. But that's a really good way to do it. Like,
Yeah.
You can't just like the fact that like, oh, I don't relate to these kids, Gotta reach out. Yeah.
And we do have that time, as teachers, when we're not teaching during the summer, we have that time to like devote to learning other things. So
totally. Yeah, that's perfect time to like learn how to be a better teacher.
Yeah, like,
Teachers to kind of go to workshops during the summer, like do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's funny because I've actually like wanted to travel to places that my students would be from and see the culture, learn the culture, learn the language, see what it's all about.
Maybe like even collect things while you're there, so you can put them in the classroom just so they have like representation, right?
So I actually have this huge plan. Or whatever, but I plan everything and I already know how my classroom's going to be organized, my schedule and everything. But one thing that I wanted to do is all the places that I've gone to already, I have collected something from it. And I wanted to do like a traveling box for the kids because I want to do kindergarten. So they would be able to make guesses throughout the day and predictions throughout the day. And then at the end, we would reveal what's in the box, and then we would learn, like, have a quick lesson on that culture and that
that's cute.
Language.
that's a good idea.
Oh, really?
It was my idea.
No, it was my idea. I don't know about the guessing, but Wake King has like traveling boxes like that in their library, and they set up different ones like each week.
Oh, how do they go about doing that?
There's like this just corner in their library that has so like there was one time I was there and it was I'm not gonna remember what country it was now. It was somewhere in Central America, I'm pretty sure. But they had like these blankets and different like statues and like a couple like religious things, and everything was just like kind of set up in the corner of the room, and then there was like pages of like information about the culture like set up around it. So that while they're in the library, they can do that. Then they had like some books, like related to that culture, and it was really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, my idea, guys.
Unoriginal. She went to Wake King.
Actually, I've never stepped foot in Wake King. That's like that's the one element I've not been at.
Is it as nice as our Wake King? I believe it. Crap.
And like the whole school learns Mandarin.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, because it's an IK school, and their sister school is in Mongolia.
Wow.
Yeah, and so the whole school's learning Mandarin.
Are you
Where's Carl Kujer's? Is Carl Kujer's sister's school?
Yeah, somewhere around there too, because they're also learning Mandarin at
college. Oh, it is their Mandarin.
What?
Yeah, I don't know where their sister's school is.
I'm shook. I'm shook right now.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Why did you pick Carl Kujer? I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah, that's why.
Oh yeah,
not because it's close to downtown or anything.
I think that's really cool because I feel like especially
especially in the U.S., we really focus on Spanish here.
Yeah.
You know, but Mandarin's like the #1 language spoken in the world. And I think it's cool that more schools are focusing on that now.
Exactly. You know, I don't really hear about that often because it's always just Spanish and English.
Well, I'm actually surprised that we don't have more of a French influence of language because of Canada. Like,
Yeah,
Well, on the eastern side, though. They're
that's true.
But if you get north enough, you have the French. And I mean, I've heard a lot of I've heard a lot of French Canadians come down, and I see them like on a that I work. And so I'm just surprised that doesn't influence more. I mean, because I think Spanish does have a huge influence because it is a boarding, but bordering.
Well, and it's also interesting that besides Spanish, the most spoken language in like Bellingham schools, besides, so like it goes English, Spanish, and then it's Punjabi. And so yeah, it's really interesting how diverse languages are. And I don't know, it's like, it makes you think like, why have we spent so long just focusing on one?
Well, hey, we're lucky enough to get one language in school like this.
Yeah, we're
work on that.
Baby steps here.
Maybe we'll get two.
Yeah, that's more than before because I've never heard of whole schools teaching like different languages. You know, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
I was like my high school in middle school because I took French.
In middle school?
Middle school and high school I took French.
Wow.
And but our only options were French and Spanish. And so, you know, French is like, you know, it's all fine and dandy. I wanted to do it just because I thought it was pretty, but like it's so it's like
that's what I did.
You know, yeah,
If
but
I
not
had
only is it not like the most practical in the US, but it's like the amount of people in the world that speak French compared to the amount of people who speak, you know,
Well, there's only one
Mandarin
country
and
versus
Punjabi and like all these other
Yeah.
languages.
Like those are the ones we're actually going to come across, you know,
Yeah.
or like more likely to.
Well, see, but those are languages that, you know, are spoken by people of color, and so we don't speak those in the U.S. It's like not taught in our schools.
Wow.
I was
didn't even think of that.
I was only offered Spanish. You could either do
Mine too.
Spanish, band, or tech. I think something.
Oh, where's Aquara?
Or no, shop. Spanish, shop, and
Interesting.
and so I took Spanish, and then I took French freshman year in high school. I mixed the two up all the time. I was like, por favor, merci.
That's a good point, though. I've never thought of that.
Yeah,
that like
I haven't either.
French is being taught, so it's a white language, you know.
Yeah, they were German.
Yeah,
Yeah,
German.
so German.
It's always
Yeah.
French and Spanish.
Yeah, I think they did.
What was German high school?
Yeah.
French.
Those are the only ones I've heard of,
French.
or ASL, but you know.
Yeah,
In my high school, it was actually pretty big. And so for languages, for middle school, we only had French and Spanish. But for high school, we had French, German, Spanish, Japanese, Mandarin, and ASL.
Nope.
And so like,
Just had Spanish. That was it. That was it. That's all.
That's crazy.
there was, and like they had clubs for each of those languages. So even if you weren't like taking the actual classes, you could still go and like learn about the culture. Like French club, we would watch French movies and different things. So it was really neat.
Well, I feel like they should have started that a long time ago, especially like starting in elementary school, like giving them the option to learn about cultures like that. That would have been so beneficial.
That's why we're gonna be great teachers, guys.
Yeah.
Now we know. Now we're learning.
We are the generation. Yeah.
Exactly.
We're the
We'll
future.
just walk in the classroom speaking 5 different languages.
Barely speak English, okay? Sometimes I have hard time with that.
I'm sorry, the verb goes where?
Exactly.
There's a subject. Sorry, what?
Let's see.
What other notes do I have on my million pages?
Yeah, well, no, these are good. Keep the ball rolling.
Let's see. Hannah, you had the question on yours. How do we create classroom expectations that cater to diverse learners as well?
That was something I was thinking about because, like, you know, different cultures have different mannerisms. You know, like looking people in the eye is disrespectful to some cultures, and like those kind of things. So I don't know. Yeah, that's
That would
something
be
like,
really hard.
exactly. So how do you like juggle like what's like okay and what's not in your classroom?
Well, I think that's where
Without
you
being
know
disrespectful.
your kids and you
Mhm.
ask individually and communication's open.
Mhm.
Because with one, I always like, this is just a very, very, very small example, but I always offer either a hug or a high five.
Mhm.
So it's either something that they're comfortable with or something that they can just walk by with and just,
Mhm.
you know, like barely touching.
Yeah, see what is okay with them.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And 9 out of 10 times, the guys will choose a high five and the girls will hug. But at the same time, just giving them that opportunity makes them feel safe and like they have a choice. And if they rather not do any, they just say bye and then just give me a wave. And I'm like, okay, that's totally fine. And so I think you can do the same with
Asking.
yeah, just asking and saying, are you comfortable with this?
Yeah.
Or is this okay for you? Unless you have a language learner that doesn't speak any English now.
Yeah, so how do you communicate that? See, that's another thing I was wondering.
Oh, okay,
So-
I see what you're saying.
One thing I was thinking was maybe like finding out what cultures are going to be in your classroom and maybe like doing your own research on them and seeing like what you can find so you can base it off of that.
Or holding off everything and asking them to bring in information from their culture. And so,
There was, sorry, continue. I interrupted.
But I mean, like with the ELLs, like or like students who don't know how to communicate that, you know, like maybe doing that before even school year starts. Just like start thinking about that.
The YMCA program that I was in down here in Seattle, we would do a family survey at the beginning of the year. And it was things like, what languages do you speak at home? And like, what holidays do you celebrate? And it was just like different things that learn about their family. But also, I'm trying to remember, it was pretty recent, but there was one of my professors at Western. She was saying how there was once where there was a Indian, not native, but like Indian child in her classroom, and she likes to incorporate music and different like types of music, and so she found this. It was like a Bollywood song, and like she turned it on, and all the kids were like dancing and having so much fun. But the two Indian boys stood in the back of the classroom with just huge eyes, and they were just completely still, and they were like, "You should not have played that song. That was not appropriate."
Oh, oh no!
And then the next day, they come back and they're like, "So we told our parents about the song that you played," and she was like, "Well, there's my job." But he was like, and the little boy hands her a flash drive and is like, "So we put together some of our favorite songs."
Oh, that's awesome.
And for you to play. And it was just like, just having that connection and like making an effort to start a conversation and to start like awareness, I think is the first and biggest step you can take.
Mm-hmm.
That was a good example.
Yeah. Oh,
That started off bad at first.
Yeah, I was like, oh no, did she get fired? Yeah. That's an awesome way to incorporate like different cultures in your classroom. The kids enjoyed it too, so it seems like it makes them feel good about themselves.
I think we also don't really give the kids the benefit of the doubt when we talk about not wanting to teach other cultures. Oh, well, this kid's not gonna like it. This kid's not. It's like,
yeah, they're gonna love it. They don't know. They don't have these biases that we grow up with.
Yeah, exactly. It's like these biases actually come from their parents, right? And you know, it's just our job to give information and for them to, you know, decipher it however they want. And if they have a good time doing it, great. And 9 out of 10 times they will, because music is universal, and you know, like enjoyment and celebrations are universal as well.
And it's those like taken for granted assumptions that prevents any kind of effort to go into learning other cultures or trying to connect with the student on a deeper level. And if you don't connect, there's no way they're going to learn. You're going to learn how to teach in the future for the rest of your career years later.
Yeah,
like trying to get better each year, which is what we should be doing. Like trying to improve like each year. You know, like
One thing that maybe can be our second muddy question is how do you
I'm ready.
how do you how do you have kids share their culture without forcing them to be advocates for their culture? Like, because there are a lot of people who, like there was, oh my gosh, senior year English class, there was once where we were reading a book and it was about like African American like slavery times, and my teacher turned to the two Black people in the class and was like, tell us what you know about this.
Oh my God.
And it's like, well, it was way before their time. We're here in 2014 sitting in an American like high school, and it's like they don't know about it. And so it's like that assumption that's like, or it's like I don't know, like they come from another culture and it's like, oh, tell me everything. And it's like, they might not know a lot. Like maybe they were born in California.
Yeah. Well, we took that class together, right? That our first quarter, that seminar where we had those two guest speakers that yeah, and they work, the two guest speakers that work at Western, you know, that I'm trying to remember their names. It was like that one.
I try to forget that class on a
Vine.
daily basis.
They're like, I don't know. I think they were. I'm trying to remember. I'm pretty sure the girl was Hawaiian. I don't remember what the guy was. They might have both been Hawaiian. But anyways, they were talking about.
I think he was Native American.
Okay. But I think she specifically was talking about how, you know, it's important to not ever, like try to, as a white person, try never to be the voice for a person of color and try to say like what they need and, you know, about their cultures, but also, you know, so it's important to like let them, you know, have their own voices and not try to overpower that. But also, she said that as a woman of color, she gets asked all the time to be that voice, and she was saying that it's, you know, that she doesn't want to be asked to be that voice anymore. To, you know, that's like she doesn't want people talking for her, but she also doesn't want to have to guest speak at a lecture every other day when she get, you know,
just because of ethnicity.
Yeah.
I think we also need to be careful kind of with how we worded that question at the same time, because we are advocates for our own culture no matter what your culture is. I mean, we have 2 multicultural classes, 3 multicultural classes that I'm in right now, and each one has asked us to bring in our own culture and be the speaker for our own culture. And the definition of culture changes between person to person. So I think what I hear you guys describing this as is a generalization of culture. Is that true?
Yeah, or sort of like making them like be the experts, or like sort of assuming their knowledge without assuming their knowledge and connection to the culture.
Okay. Like people coming up to me and being like, hey, like, does your mom make the best lumpia? Like, what's the best Filipino food? You know, just like being like aggressively like.
So it sounds like that's like generalization for culture.
Yeah.
I guess
you're talking about your culture as a whole, not your individual culture. Does that make sense?
It still goes back to that assuming they know,
right?
And they're kids and they don't even know their own culture yet.
I guess what I'm trying to do is like make like differentiate what type of culture we're talking about, because I want to make sure that I'm on the same page as everybody. Like I don't want to do that either. And so like, I don't ask people, how do you feel about your culture? But you know, just making sure that like I know exactly what you guys are talking about. So yeah. So because I could ask, you know, like, oh, well, what is the favorite dish that your mom makes, or what is your favorite dish that your mom makes, which is a lot different than asking what is your, or like you said, like, does your mom make this? I don't know what dish you said.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's 2 different things, because you have your individual culture within the big culture, but I feel like you guys are talking about making assumptions about the big culture, right?
Yeah, or sort of, I guess, just like forcing them to be the experts.
Yeah, like having them kind of like perform it, kind of, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
You broke it down.
Because what you were saying is like the luau. The luau is like all.
You broke up.
You have to speak for the whole Hawaiian, right? That's what you guys are talking about?
No, I think during the lecture, she was more talking about, you know, issues that, like, racial issues that people are dealing with, and like people asking her about, like, you know, her culture's experience with racism in this country and like what should be done about it.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
talking about
You're
like,
right,
you know, not
Okay.
like white people saying like this is what needs to be done about racism, but like actually asking different people from different ethnicities what needs to be done about it.
Okay.
But was she saying that she doesn't want to have to talk
Yeah,
about
she's
that?
saying that it's important to not make those assumptions about what should be done, you know, when you're not a person of color, but also to not ask the
Breaking
people of color all the time to then
Yeah.
be that voice also, because that's a big burden on them.
Okay.
Is what she was saying.
That's
So it's a
interesting
fine
to
line, I
me.
suppose.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's how do you allow kids, or how do you encourage kids to teach others about their culture and appreciate their culture without forcing them to be the voice for their entire culture? Like saying like being the voice, and it's like how that one English teacher, like just because they were Black, he had them be the voice for like Black history and slavery, and it's like that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was okay. I get.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I guess we're on the same page.
I didn't mean to like.
Yeah.
I just wanted to.
I was confused.
Okay.
I think I think that's a huge question that has a lot of answers, but I think one kind of practice that goes really well with that is just the writing workshop in general. Because when I don't know if you guys have taken classes yet, writing workshop.
I've never heard of that. No.
So it's like, basically it's this where you have a 10-minute mini lesson, you teach one tiny little strategy, and then the students spend 1 hour a day just free writing whatever they want. And you like never tell them that they have to try the strategy or that what they have to write about, and they can just write whatever they want. You take them through the whole like writing cycle, and it's like really emphasizing that, you know, them being writers themselves. But and it's like, you know, the latest and greatest thing in literacy right now. And I think it really lends itself to that too, because if they're writing about whatever they want, then if they want, they can be writing about their own culture and their own families and things like that, how they feel about their own, you know, ethnicities and their own, you know, personal identities. But if they also don't want to write about that and they want to write about, you know, their friends or the latest movie they saw, then they can do that too. Yeah. So, you know, I feel like that's a good way to let them be that voice and also share that with the rest of the class when they're like presenting in the author's chair, but also not forcing them into anything.
Yeah, like not singling a student out. Yeah.
Are there any
What?
before we wrap up?
What did you say?
Do you have any like final ideas before we wrap up, or like questions or
Something that I wanted to talk about. Okay, so I read about the perspectives on failure. I know you did too. I wanted to talk to you about the genetic inferiority thing, like what you said about that.
Yeah. I had a lot of issues writing that. I was like, this is painful. Okay, any specific questions as to something I said?
I mean, just I want to hear your perspective on that framework there. Because I didn't necessarily agree with what you said.
It was interesting, yeah.
I was just trying to summarize.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
And again, like I said, it was kind of painful. I guess I was just trying to summarize the fact that, because I had the book. I didn't have it online. I had the book. And so I was literally just reading and like summarizing as I was reading. I'm trying to think exactly what I wrote. I don't remember what I wrote.
I have it right here. Okay. She writes in quotes that genetic inferiority.
You got it, girl.
is where, quote, certain minority groups do better than others because of genetic factors.
Yeah, so I literally just took, because I didn't know how to.
It's what you said afterwards that I was questioning.
So what was it that
It says, I think this is important for people to remember because it isn't just about genes. This is true for everyone. Some people are better at certain things, but others are better at other things. Our genetic makeup is different from person to person, no matter the culture. It is important to keep that knowledge close.
So I guess what I meant was not necessarily. I kind of tried to take a back road and take it away from
just
smarts.
Yeah, just mentioning how it differentiates.
Right, because we have, for example, I was thinking of like Tori is an art major. She's in our cohort. Somebody who's an art major.
Oh, I know Tori.
Is going to be a lot better at art than me. So, like on a project where we have a choice to do whatever we want, she might choose to do the art route.
Oh, so you're talking about like an individual.
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
yes. So that's what I'm saying.
Cool.
I'm not saying like, because again, I didn't like
Alex,
how it was.
Hold on a second. I read it and I was like, girl.
Yeah.
But I see what you mean now.
I just agree with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like coming back to it.
Kind of, because I think the point of the article is that a lot of these frameworks are
they don't work.
inaccurate.
Yeah.
But like it was like summarizing what they were,
Mm-hmm.
and then saying like these are the problems with this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
So
like
a lot of it was-
I didn't like the way it was going with the fact of like certain cultural genes. I wanted to focus more on the individual, that it changes between the individuals more.
Yeah, more like talents and skills as opposed to like IQ or that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I probably didn't word it the best considering I was like
It's
burnt
okay.
out at that point. I was like, this is my last thing to do. I'm just going to summarize.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify things there.
No, I'm glad you did. Yeah. So that's kind of
Because you
where.
interpreted it a little bit.
That's what I'm
Right?
saying. I did, but I just like.
So then what could I have said to make it sound a little bit better?
Maybe just like not agreeing with it, because
Okay.
I feel like the reason why they put it out there is to say that like all of these frameworks are like inaccurate.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
That's,
So I should have. So instead of
you don't
saying
have to
like.
change what you said.
No, but I want to though, because I want to make sure that I get my point fully across. Because you guys thought that I agreed with what the book was saying, but I was agreeing with a variation of what the book was saying. And so I think I need to specifically say that is like, well, no, but this is how I see individuals of like everyone.
Yeah.
Someone what is
like
not good at everything, but is good at something. I don't remember the quote on
Just
that.
how like Nicole said it, like from your talents and your skills versus your IQ.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between those things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, definitely. Thank you.
and like saying like I don't agree with this.
It's okay. I just wanted to put it out
I
there.
need to know these things so that I don't make the same mistake again. That's an awful mistake.
It's all good, man.
Okay, cool. I'm glad we clarified that, and you guys don't think I'm like a raging bitch.
I was like, is she a little racist? We're okay.
No, it's just lack my IQ, guys.
Stop. Was there anything else you guys wanted to bring up at all, though?
Did anybody watch those
Bringing
videos
points.
that were at the end?
I didn't get a chance to
About the
do
community
that.
asset thing?
There was one about the, dreamers, and then there was one about undocumented. It was like a 3-minute thing about undocumented like high schoolers. They were like, it was at the end of like the thing.
Where is it at?
I think it was like one of the optional resources.
Okay, cool.
Oh,
did you watch any of the videos?
What? What are you talking about?
Go ahead, give us a little insight here if you want.
Each session has like what you're supposed to do, and there's like additional resources.
No, I didn't watch them. Okay, guys, I can admit it now.
Like always.
I can admit it now.
I know we're like,
It's just Teddy on top of it, like always.
I know.
I guess obviously there's all that stuff right now happening about like the DACA students, and I guess I didn't really know a whole lot about that until I was watching these videos, and they were really interesting. Like, this was made a while ago, so the video was made when Obama was president, and they were trying to push the DREAM Act. But it was talking about how like even like those students who are allowed to get, who grew up here and went to college and are, studying, and they can apply for residency, like as a university student, like that they're not allowed to pay in-state tuition because technically they're not like a legal in-state resident, so they have to pay out-of-state tuition no matter where they go. And I mean, even like Western's in-state tuition is like $7,000, out-of-state tuition is like $45,000.
Yeah, it's
50,000,
ridiculous.
Yeah,
and so that like even if they become residents or like get you know, they apply for documentation, everything through the act, like they still have to pay a reasonable amount.
Really?
Of money to
Even
go
if
to
they
college.
become a citizen or like
Well, I
become
think
like
that-
legal status here?
Well, the legal status takes forever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like you would,
does it?
you just have to agree to be like part of the
Oh.
Dream Act. You have to agree that you will start applying for for citizenship.
Uh-huh.
You know, you don't have to like it's not something that will happen like while you're in school. Yeah,
But
so
how
but
do
only
they not get-
17 states, I guess, including Washington, because Washington's the
Woo! Yeah,
Seventeen
it's the
best.
best.
Yeah, will let them pay in-state tuition.
Wow.
But
didn't
then
know
the rest of
that.
the states you have to pay out of state.
But isn't the only clarification for in-state is if you have lived in the state for more than 5 years?
Mhm.
Unless
It's
you're not a
supposed to be.
documented citizen, I guess, in most states.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the little fine print thing.
Oh
Yeah.
no, that's so bad. That's
Yeah.
so bad.
Yeah, that is awful.
I guess I didn't know any of that, so it was
I
interesting.
didn't know
Yeah.
either.
It is weird. I want to go back and watch those videos. I know that I
Yeah.
haven't really had the biggest time on my hands this week, but
Eventually, because that sounds really interesting.
definitely.
Yeah.
Time to go.
We're good.
Yeah. Time to wrap it up.
She said, "Don't make it an hour." And
Oh,
we're now at an hour,
sorry.
so-
Oh.
I think that's it.
Yeah, cool.
Bye.